For centuries, crowns have been seen as symbols of glory, strength, and divine favor. But behind palace walls, many royal stories began not with triumph, but with tragedy. Children born weak, sick, or deformed carried more than their own suffering. They carried the burden of entire empires. Their lives were hidden, their names erased, their struggles turned into whispers of curses and divine punishment. These were not just family sorrows. They were turning points that reshaped nations. This is the untold history of royal children, whose fragile bodies changed the fate of kingdoms, and whose voices were lost to silence. Crowns and castles projected perfection, but behind the walls, reality was fragile. For centuries, monarchies depended on more than soldiers or wealth to maintain their rule. They claimed that their power was given directly by God, and to prove this divine favor, they presented themselves as symbols of strength, stability, and order. A royal family was expected to look flawless, not only in manners and clothing but also in health. In this world, a strong heir was not simply a child. He was the future of the dynasty, the guarantee that the throne would pass safely to the next generation. But when a baby was born weak, deformed, or sickly, the problem was far greater than a private family sorrow. It was seen as a curse, a sign that the family had lost divine approval. Courtiers whispered, subjects doubted, and rival powers saw an opening. A single child's weakness could shake the foundation of a kingdom. And nowhere was this illusion shattered more tragically than in Spain, with a king who could barely walk or speak. He was called El Hechizado, the Bewitched. Charles II of Spain was the last ruler of the Spanish Habsburgs, and his life showed how fragile a dynasty could become. Generations of close intermarriage within the Habsburg family left Charles with severe deformities. His jaw was so enlarged and protruding that chewing food and speaking clearly were almost impossible. His body was weak and underdeveloped, and he did not learn to walk until he was 8 years old. His education also suffered, and many who met him described him as simple-minded and unable to understand politics. To make matters worse, he was infertile, and after 2 marriages he produced no heir. For a family that ruled a vast empire, this was not just a private tragedy but a political disaster. When Charles died childless in 1700, rival powers fought over who should succeed him, leading to the War of Spanish Succession, a conflict that involved much of Europe and permanently shifted the balance of power. But Spain wasn't the only kingdom where a fragile child rewrote destiny. In England, the Tudor line nearly collapsed before it began. England's golden future rested on a boy who never saw his 16th birthday. Prince Arthur, the eldest son of Henry VII, was carefully raised to be the hope of the Tudor dynasty. His marriage to Catherine of Aragon joined England to Spain, creating an alliance that promised stability and strength. Yet Arthur's health was never secure. Pale, thin, and often weak, he seemed unfit for the burdens of kingship. Only a few months after his wedding, he fell gravely ill, most likely from the sweating sickness or another sudden disease. At just 15 years old he died, leaving his young widow behind and the Tudor succession in crisis. The crown passed to his younger brother, Henry, who would later marry Catherine himself. This union, and Henry's desperate quest for a male heir, led to annulments, religious upheaval, and England's break from the Catholic Church. Arthur's death reshaped religion. But in France, a royal child's suffering would mirror the monarchy's downfall. Born as hope, he died as a symbol of cruelty. Louis Charles, the second son of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, entered the world in 1785 as the Dauphin of France, carrying the expectations of a troubled monarchy. For a short time, his presence gave the royal family hope that the dynasty would endure despite unrest in the country. But when the French Revolution erupted, his life took a devastating turn. After his parents were executed, the young boy was locked in a dark prison cell. There he faced neglect, illness, and mistreatment from guards. Cut off from family and care, his health declined rapidly. By the age of 10, he had wasted away, dying alone in captivity in 1795. To many, His tragic fate symbolized not only the cruelty of the revolution but also the complete collapse of the Bourbon monarchy. The child who might have been Louis XVII instead became a reminder of a dynasty broken beyond repair. If France's child prince was destroyed by revolution, Russia's heir was destroyed by his own blood. Every bruise could kill him, yet he carried an empire's future. Alexei Romanov, the only son of Tsar Nicholas II and Alexandra, was born in 1904 after 4 daughters. His birth was celebrated as the survival of the Romanov dynasty, but soon it became clear that he suffered from hemophilia, a rare genetic disorder that prevents blood from clotting. Even the smallest injury could lead to life-threatening bleeding. The disease had spread through Europe's royal families from Queen Victoria, and in Russia it became a curse on the throne. Desperate to protect their son, the Romanovs placed their trust in Grigory Rasputin, a mystic healer whose strange influence seemed to ease Alexei's suffering. Over time, Rasputin's power at court sparked scandal and suspicion, convincing many that the monarchy was under the sway of a dangerous outsider. Alexei's illness, meant to be hidden, became a symbol of weakness in a crumbling empire. His fragile body carried the weight of a dynasty already losing control. Alexei's bleeding weakened a dynasty, but in Britain, the tragedy repeated in a queen's womb again and again. 17 pregnancies, yet no heir to survive. Queen Anne of England endured more loss than perhaps any other monarch. Time after time, she carried the hope of the Stuart dynasty, but miscarriages, stillbirths, and infant deaths followed her. Only one child, Prince William, Duke of Gloucester, lived beyond infancy, and for a brief moment he seemed to secure the family's future. But at the age of 11, William also died, leaving and without a surviving heir. Her personal grief soon became a national crisis. When Anne herself passed away in 1714, the Stuart line ended, and the crown shifted to the Hanoverian family, changing the course of Britain's history. A dynasty that had ruled for generations collapsed not through war, but through the silence of a nursery. For some dynasties, tragedy struck before a child could even be seen. Not every deformed royal child was remembered. Some were erased from history. In many dynasties, when a baby was born with a visible deformity or serious illness, the event was treated not as a family matter but as a threat to the throne's image. Such children were often hidden from public view, quietly sent to distant estates, or placed in monasteries where they would live and die in silence. Some were never acknowledged at all, their names absent from official records. For monarchs who ruled by projecting perfection, admitting to weakness could invite doubt, rumor, and even rebellion. Silence became a strategy for survival, even if it meant erasing their own children from memory. Generations of infants disappeared into secrecy, their short lives forgotten in order to protect crowns and bloodlines. Yet, one queen broke this silence, and refused to hide her child. She chose to show what others hid. Unlike many rulers before her, Queen Victoria did not attempt to erase her daughter Princess Victoria, who suffered from a spinal deformity. Though her condition caused pain and limited movement, she remained visible as part of the royal family. This openness was unusual in a world where weakness was often hidden away. At the same time, Victoria's bloodline carried the gene for hemophilia, which passed through her descendants into several European royal houses. The disorder spread across courts in Russia, Spain, and Germany, creating political strain and personal tragedies that shaped history far beyond Britain. By refusing to conceal her own daughter, Victoria highlighted the humanity of her family, but the genetic legacy she carried reminded Europe that royal blood could be as fragile as any other. These children were more than private sorrows. They altered wars, religions, and entire nations. One weak heir could trigger wars larger than any army. Across Europe, the pattern repeated again and again. In Spain, Charles II's frail body and infertility ended the Habsburg line and set off the War of Spanish Succession, a conflict that pulled in nearly every major power on the continent. In England, Arthur Tudor's early death placed the crown on Henry VIII's head, leading to the break with Rome and centuries of religious change. In Russia, Alexei Romanov's hemophilia weakened the monarchy's image and opened the door for Rasputin's influence, deepening the distrust that helped fuel revolution. Each time, the health of a single child carried consequences that reshaped entire nations. Dynasties did not only fall on battlefields. They fell in nurseries, when a fragile heir made a kingdom vulnerable. But why did monarchies fear deformity so deeply? The answer lies not in medicine, but in power. In monarchies, perception mattered more than reality. A ruler's strength was measured not only by armies or wealth, but by the appearance of divine blessing. A healthy heir was seen as proof that God favored the dynasty, while a sick or deformed child raised dangerous doubts. Rivals whispered that the family was cursed, subjects questioned their right to rule, and foreign powers saw weakness to exploit. For this reason, a fragile heir was not just a private sorrow but a political threat. Monarchs feared that one visible deformity could unravel the carefully built image of stability on which their authority rested. The true danger was not always the illness itself, but the perception of divine judgment that surrounded it. A child's weakness could echo through an entire empire, shaking loyalty and legitimacy alike. And in hiding these children, monarchs left behind a silence that still haunts history. We remember crowns, but not the cradles that broke them. Behind the grand stories of kings and queens lie the lives of children whose frailty changed the course of history. Some were recorded, like Charles II or Alexei, while countless others were erased, their names hidden so their weakness would not stain a dynasty's image. Empires that seemed unshakable crumbled not only through wars or invasions, but through the quiet tragedies of miscarriages, deformities, and illnesses that ended family lines. These lost children remind us that power can be undone by forces far beyond human control. The untold history of deformed royal children isn't just about the past. It asks us even today, how much power do we still give to appearances over truth?